Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Daily Dispatch. We are so honored to be joined again this Friday by our good friend, Jeff Jarvis. We had such an incredible response last week from
Welcome to today's Daily Dispatch. We are so honored to be joined again this Friday by our good friend, Jeff Jarvis. We had such an incredible response last week from
There we go. I had my YouTube on at the same time. Anyway, Jeff, it's great to see you again. I promise we know what we're doing around here. But thank you to everybody for coming back on today at 11 a.m. Eastern. We're really grateful to all of you for joining us. Jeff, there's a lot to talk about in the media this week, but I wanted to start with this conversation that apparently Larry Ellison, the head of Oracle, whose son David just acquired a whole bunch of media networks, including CBS, and is Paramount. He acquired Paramount as part of Skydance's company and is now making a bid. I think it's an all-cash offer, right?
That's what we think, yes.
For Warner Brothers Discovery, which, among other things, owns CNN. And it looks like that is the bid favored by the White House and by the FCC, which, of course, does Donald Trump's bidding. And what I wanted to raise is that Larry Ellison was in the White House a few days ago, a day, I believe, after Scott Jennings was visiting with the president. And suddenly, word comes out that he acquires CNN. The White House wants him to immediately fire Aaron Burnett and Breonna Keller. Aaron Burnett, I might add, is one of the few shows that refuses to have Scott Jennings on. From what I can tell, he's never on that network, on that show. What do you, I mean, this is, I don't even know what to say other than this is just the wholesale takeover of independent media by this president.
It is the full organization of American media. And all we have to do is look at what he's doing to CBS. Today, the Wall Street Journal had a rather anodyne feature on what Barry Weiss is doing at CBS, blowing it up and bringing in her own guests and so on. And given that the Ellisons are, as I like to say, the mini Murdochs, the Journal was not being terribly critical of what's happening, though I think the rest of us are and should be. CNN, I think, is doomed. The interesting thing about the bids is that the other bids from Comcast and Netflix, I think, right, are for the studio and HBO Max, not for the cable channels. Right. And Warner Brothers Discovery its plan has been to split off the cable channels, as Comcast did with Versant, MS Now et al., because cable channels, linear television, now have cooties, and there's no future for them. And so one scenario here is that Hollywood gets the Hollywood part of Warner Brothers Discovery, and the cable channels go floating on an ice floe to their deaths somewhere, and then gets snapped up by somebody else. Problem there is, who knows where that might go, because it's not terribly good business, and it could be taken over by somebody else who's bad. It's not just Ellison; there are others who could do it. So I think CNN is in mortal risk right now, one way or another. And the fact that Trump is saying that he favors this deal, the fact that he thinks he has the right and will show that he has the ability to approve the deal, and that he will make demands on what happens at the network as a result, before it's bought and after it's bought, is a death knell for American journalism.
I think it's interesting that Mark Thompson, who came from the BBC and then later the New York Times and fancies himself a journalist, do you see much coverage of this on CNN or any talk about what happened? I mean, this is startling news that you have the president demanding that CNN fire one of their two of their, longtime and very prominent female, I might add, female anchors.
I haven't seen much. I don't watch CNN as much as I watch. I've got MSNBC, MS Now. MS Now. It tends to be on most times. The last time I was on CNN, on Ivy Phillips' show, where you and I met before that, it may be the last time I'll ever be on, because I was the person who was able to warn of Ellison's takeover. And it was clear from the employees I know there that they had me on because I could say it and they could not.
Right.
And so I empathize with them as a result. It's an impossible story for them to cover or even mention. And we're not going to hear it on CNN. We're not going to see it on Fox. We're not seeing this kind of coverage of what's happening. Media can't cover media well. News media are a part of the story now. They have been part of the story, but they especially are now, especially with what's going on, and they're not covering it.
Yeah, I think that part to me is the most fascinating part of all this. I mean, there are several fascinating components to this, but you kind of expect what you expect out of the White House here, and it should still shock us, and it should still shock conscience, because if we accept this as just Trump being Trump, then we might as well just call it a day and slide into authoritarianism without any fight. But the part that I think is shocking is that you do have people at CNN who run CNN, who, if you ask them if they are journalists, would say, yes, we are. And that we will follow the story without fear or favor, and that we will chase the news, and that is all we are supposed to do. And yet, this monumental story is not being mentioned and not being covered. And I don't know why it's not wall to wall being discussed. I was watching CNN last night, I believe. No, not last night, the night before. And it's the same stuff, right? It's Epstein. It's like it's I'm not suggesting Epstein's not important, but I mean, you have things here that are equally important. And I would argue maybe even more important, in the sense that this is truly the hallmark of authoritarianism, to take over the independent media and to demand who you have or don't have anchoring and reporting the news. And yet the very people who should be most threatened by this are just in some defensive crouch like this, see no evil, hear no evil, and pretending that they don't want to say anything for fear of losing their jobs. I have news for you, my friends. You're going to lose them anyway, unless you want to just totally kiss the ring. Like Aaron Burnett today, the rest of you tomorrow. Unless you turn into Fox News, which I guess some of them will be willing to do to save their jobs, but I assume the good ones will not.
Well, I felt like during the election last year, especially, noticeably the media not covering Trump in the way that they were covering Kamala Harris. I mean, I think Van Jones said it best when he gets to be lawless and she has to be flawless. And that really was the undercurrent of all of the coverage. And I remember saying on my own social medias back in October of 2024, like, I don't know what these people are doing. I don't know what these discussions that they're having. If they think they're just going to make more money if it's Trump again, I was like, I beg to differ. I was like, I think you're just going to have the opposite effect. And at the end of the day, he will be coming for your throats and your jobs and your bottom lines. And here we are in a year and change later. And all of those things that those of us who know how this works, we saw that coming. But, I sit here baffled every day.
Many years ago, I had conversations with a few dalliances with becoming a media critic in media. I talked to Max Frankel at the New York Times, and I stayed to start Entertainment Weekly instead. David Carr eventually did that role and did brilliantly in that role, but there's been no David Carr since, really. We don't have ombuds people. The New York Times got rid of its public editor. The Washington Post got rid of its. CNN never had one. At that level, I think it's difficult. If I were a CNN employee, I would be wishing like crazy that Mark Thompson, who does have stature from the New York Times and BBC, would be out there saying, no damned way, keep your hands off of us. Don't you dare threaten our democracy. But he's not. And so who's going to stand up? No one inside CNN. David Zaslav, who's selling the company now because he has no choice because the merger with Warner Brothers Discovery was a disaster. And he's not exactly a political saint by any means, but these days, if you can make David Zaslav look by comparison, then you know how screwed things are. Journalism isn't standing up for journalism.
And I guess that's the part that look, I'm not naive. I understand there's a lot of money at stake. I understand that this is people's job on the line. But if you're Mark Thompson and you have dedicated your life to working at places like the BBC and the New York Times, I assume you've made a good living. Don't you owe it to yourself, if not to the people for whom you're responsible, including Aaron Burnett?
Yeah.
Don't you owe it to them to stand up and say, not on my watch, and if you are going to engage in this kind of behavior, I'm going to leave. I mean, you saw it happen at CBS. You saw the executive producer of CBS leave, or 60 Minutes leave.
Of 60 Minutes, yep.
Of 60 Minutes leave to say, no way. You saw journalists at 60 Minutes saying, effectively, we're all going to walk if you do not make Tanya Simon his number 2, the new executive producer. If you put in a flunky who's not one of us, we will not be around for this. So you did see that kind of courage and that kind of responsible behavior, which is what you would expect from a fearless media. But if, I will say this, and this is kind of why, as a harbinger of things to come, Paul Weiss, which was the first company to bend the knee, law firm to bend the knee to Trump, saw a massive exodus of their corporate employees, which is exactly what they were trying to prevent by bending the knee. And their reason for leaving Paul Weiss was very simple. If you can't stand up for yourself, we have no guarantee that you're going to stand up for us.
Yeah.
Fine.
Exactly.
And the same thing is happening here. If you can't stand up for yourself, how do we, the viewer, believe that you're standing up for us and for the truth that we are counting?
Yeah. How can we trust you? How can we? It comes down to trust, for sure.
So I'm doing research for a next book on mass media, and I've been reading. I'm a huge admirer of the late James Carey, who was a professor at Columbia University. And I just read yesterday an address he made to journalism educators in 1978. And I was shouting amen. If you don't mind, I thought I'd just read a quick paragraph from
please
this.
do.
He said that under the force of the media, public opinion lost its anchorage because the press was obsessed with the immediate. The intense concern with present made the interest in the past and the future difficult to maintain and cultivated fanaticism, a hyper-involvement with those issues dominating headlines. Public opinion shifted with rapidity, achieved an extraordinary bitterness which soaked through every strata of society. With that, toleration and respect for other points of view disappeared, contempt was democratized, debate and discussion became menaces. All thought sank into simplicities, even among the educated. And Carey, interestingly, argues that the death of journalism was its professionalization. And he's speaking to journalism educators, that when journalism tried to make it into a profession, when Pulitzer funded the journalism school at Columbia, it separated journalism from the people. It put it above the people. And I subscribe to that heartily. I think that journalism believes that it's somehow better. It somehow is not subject to these kinds of attacks that are after every other institution. And they don't realize they have to defend themselves against it. And they have to defend others within the institution of journalism against it. And we're not standing up for our own. I also look at Vanity Fair and Condé Nast. We'll talk, I think, in a few minutes probably about the recent hire at Vanity Fair. But they also, we saw 4 people at Condé Nast fired because they dared protest the folding of Teen Vogue. And today there was a story, and I think the Times, that prominent New Yorker writers protesting the firing. One of the 4 was a fact checker. The political writer at Wired, who's brilliant, was fired. So the Condé Nast 4 are out there, and there isn't enough protest in their behalf either. Or the fact that when Trump met with, I always get his initials mixed up, from Saudi Arabia last week.
Yeah.
Thank you. MBS, thank you. There was too little protest about the fact that this is an alleged murderer of a journalist. Even at that level, they don't stand up. The journalists who were murdered in Gaza, there was too little protest. All around, we see this absolute lack of will from journalists to defend themselves. So exactly what you said to Paul Weiss. If you won't defend yourself, how can we expect you to defend the truth and those past journalism?
And, you brought up this recent hire at Condé Nast, and I wanted to talk about that for a minute. Not because I care so much about the salacious gossip, although it is pretty good.
Oh, it is fun.
It is fun to watch. I'm not going to pretend I'm floating above that because it is fun, especially if you know the personalities involved. But we're talking here about Olivia Nuzzi, who was, yes, thank you, who was the writer for New York Magazine. and I think actually a very good writer. Her access journalism aspect of it was not my cup of tea, but as a technician, I thought she was pretty good. And then you have Ryan Lisa, formerly of the New Yorker, who left kind of in a spectacular blow up with the New Yorker, then went to Politico, and they were engaged. For people who don't know, living together, and they were effectively broken up by, according to both of them, by the fact that he found out that she was having a affair, sort of, kind of,
a intimate relationship of some form or another,
with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah,
who I might add denies the whole thing. But she has now written a book about all of this. She moved out to LA. She talked her way into Vanity Fair's, becoming Vanity Fair's West Coast correspondent. And then she did we can get to the New York Times in a moment, but the New York Times, I did what I think is a disgraceful piece on tough piece on her, despite everything else. What I find fascinating about this is that Colby Hall at Mediaite, who's not always everybody's cup of tea, but in this case I thought was right, wrote a column basically saying that we're all morons and she's smart. She has figured out what journalism is like in today's America. It is all about access. It is all about making yourself the story. It is all about self-promotion. And it is all about controversy and just effectively you're creating your own brand, right? It's the Real Housewives-ation. I don't think you use that term, but I will. Reality of journalism.
That's really accurate, Julie. Oh.
Yeah. And it was, I thought, an incredibly accurate portrayal of what it means to be a journalist these days, so that when you are an Aaron Burnett and you are somebody who has done, I think, very good work just reporting the news.
Substantive,
right? You're it's okay to push you to the side, and your network is not going to stand up for you. And I don't know where you're going to land next, because you've been part of networks your whole career, whether it's CNBC and then at CNN. But if you're Olivia Nuzzi, you're sort of sui generis. You don't have to belong to a network or Vanity Fair or New York Magazine. You can go and do what we all do on Substack, which is be a celebrity writer on Substack and probably make a fortune. Or, you can do whatever you want to do, because it's you as much as the product that you're delivering. And I guess I don't know if you agree with that, Jeff, or what you think about that theory.
I look at it from the viewpoint of, why did Vanity Fair think this was a good idea?
For the reason to
hire Olivia Nuzzi, right? And they got her book excerpt, and they wanted the heat. And I come back to my unified theory of media right now, which is that mass media are dead and dying, and this is a desperate act for heat. Mm-hmm. You will hire her, and she'll do controversial things, and that'll get us clicks, and that'll get us traffic, and that'll be a good thing. And what it's going to do to the brand, the trust, the relationship, the reputation of Vanity Fair, never mind. Doesn't matter. And this is Vanity Fair. It's not like it's the high paragon priesthood of journalism. I'm not trying to say that.
But it's still, listen, it's a step up from New York Magazine, I would say, in some ways.
Yes. Yes, I agree. But Molly John Fast isn't there anymore, as far as I know correctly. And 4 people were just fired from Condé Nast, including a very talented political reporter at Wired. And they hire Olivia Nuzzi. And I think they won it for the fire. Yeah. And it's disturbing. Again, I have to go back to Teen Vogue. Teen Vogue from 2016 was a grand exception. They had a rare courage to do political coverage that wasn't elsewhere, and it came out of Condé Nast, which we think of as the house that hype built. But by rejecting that, at the same time you hire Nuzzi, what does that say about the future of that enterprise? And I worked there for many years, and so I'm personally disappointed in it. It's a fun story, but it's a story that does not speak well for us in the profession. There was a scandal at Der Spiegel some years ago. A writer named Klaus Relotius, who was just considered the best writer in all of German journalism, and he was under this pressure to make ever the better story, and he turned out to be a fabulist and was exposed. And I saw a self-examination. My German is very, very bad from high school and college, but I try with much help from Google News to translate things. And I translated the self-examination that was going on in Der Spiegel, particularly, and in German journalism around this, about the power of the story, about the fact that the storyteller has too much power, about the pressure to make ever better story in that case, or in the case of Newsy, to have ever better access. What have we built in journalism as an institution in this attention economy? And we don't, it goes back to what we said before at a whole different level. We don't have self-examination about it, let alone self-defense, also self-examination.
It's interesting because I assume a hire like that had to go through Anna Wintour, right? At Condé Nast. I assume Anna Wintour probably had to approve it. And what does it say about Anna Wintour, who I think has had a pretty good finger on the pulse of things over the course of her career, that she thought, despite everything you just said, firing poor people and folding Teen Vogue, that this was the future of one of her star enterprises. There are not many magazines left, right? Vanity Fair happens to be one of them. And I just, to me, the fact that Anna Wintour had to sign off on this probably says that this is where she sees, and therefore other executives in media see the future, which is CNN could hire Olivia Newsy, they probably would, right? Why not? Why not? People would tune in. People would tune in just for the shit show, right? The same way we're all sitting here try to reload Ryan Lee's Substack these days to see if there's like a coming out.
Part
right?
two.
Well, I mean, by the way, sorry, Michelle, but just to finish, he's brilliant in how he handled this too. He's trying to create something on Substack. I don't know how much money he made on that and how many new subscribers he got, but I bet she was not insignificant.
Yeah.
So good.
Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, well, Bravo used to show operas and ballets, and now it's the Real Housewives of whatever town everyone's living in. And I had a family member who was a managing editor at Teen Vogue for several years, left during the pandemic. I think probably could have predicted that this was eventually going to happen to that publication just by, I think, the culture inside. But and speaking of culture, and I would just love to get your thoughts on this, Jeff, because culture is such a big part of this also, because it's meeting people where they are. And I guess where everyone is this, the Real Housewife is vacation, as Julie so put it so well. Vogue, right around the inauguration, fashion magazine, platformed all of the people who were going to the candlelight dinner before the inauguration. What are they wearing? Ivanka Trump, who had previously been kind of blacklisted, right, from polite society and like this Anna Wintour world, but suddenly became normalized again. And I'm sure anybody who's a fashionista or something was reading this being like, oh, well, this is nice. She looks beautiful. What role do you think culture in that sense and the culture, I guess, like arts and entertainment and its overreach into this as well? Do you see them already kind of bending the knee in terms of like normalizing just the culture around Donald Trump within other means through fashion, through television, through sports and everything else?
That is such a great question, Michelle. That's such a great topic for exploration. I'll go back to my unified theory of mass media, that it's dying, and Anna Wintour used to dictate culture. She dictated fashion.
Yeah.
She dictated what people did, and they're well aware that that's over. It's completely gone now. The culture makes itself now. Yeah. But we have these old institutions of mass and scale that can't get used to that. They don't understand how to listen to people. They don't understand how to go to TikTok and find what colors are hot right now, to put it at a trivial level. Yeah. And so they still are trying to make it at that old level of heat and attention and the attention economy. And the culture has gone past them. It has gone way past them. I wonder, as you were talking, Julie, about Condé Nast and Anna Wintour, what Cy Newhouse would have said or done. On the one hand, I would like to think that he would have said, Cy would never have allowed, when I worked there, he wouldn't allow things like a Good Housekeeping paint line from Sherwin-Williams. He wouldn't want to do that to that brand. And say what you will about Condé Nast and its history and Cy, but he saved the New Yorker, and the New Yorker found a new renaissance under him, right? That's the good side. On the bad side, the recent story about Condé Nast and all its source said that we can blame Cy perhaps for Donald Trump, because it was Cy who thought that The Art of the Deal would be a great deal for a book, and that's the business side of it. And it's not that I'm lionizing Cy, I'm not, but it's interesting to look at the value of brands now in the culture you talk about. Right? Television has been cheapened to the extent that it is utterly worthless now. And I was a TV critic back in the day, and there was a time when TV was better than film. And TV is now utter dreck.
Yep.
Hollywood is sequel after sequel, and it's dreck. Television shows used to have a positive impact in our culture. Right? I think we have gay marriage for now, in some measure, primarily because of the people who had the courage to stand out of the closet, but also because of the shows and the movies that made it, that brought it into the level of norms in society.
Cheers.
And that,
I think
yes.
a designated driver, right? I mean, that they normalized that and seeped its way into policy and culture in a very powerful way,
So it's not just news that's bankrupt now. I think it's old culture that's bankrupt. And, I lament that greatly. And I don't say that I am an old fart, so for me to say that it used to be better in the old days, no, it wasn't. And I celebrate the fact that culture has taken over culture. I celebrate the fact that fashion is now set on TikTok and Instagram and not in the pages of Vogue. And there's a lot more chaff, but there's much more wheat within it. The challenge now is to find the good voices. Is to find the smart and informed and experienced voices. And our old institutions of media have no idea how to do that. And so they're just going with the easy path, especially now out of fear of Trump. They've cheapened themselves irrevocably.
Well, I think also they think that Trump is just a flash in the pan and that in 3 years he'll be gone and then they can just go back to normal. And I think we all know here that that's, first of all, I don't think he's leaving, but also that this new reality is in fact our new reality. And I just wanted to ask another question here too, because Donald Trump and the Republicans were so good at inserting themselves into culture, I think in a way that maybe the liberals are not, because they've dictated so much of culture over the last century. But Republicans are really captivating it in a different way. But I think sports is another piece of this, because Donald Trump's going to football games and he's talking about some new NFL rule or something. There was a special teams guy. I'm sorry, I don't know football all that well, but from the Kansas City Chiefs, he was like asked about Donald Trump and his comments on this. And I just want to play this because it spoke volumes. Here we go.
Criticized the new kickoff rules when he was at the Washington game. What's your reaction?
He doesn't even know what he's looking at. He has no idea what's going on with the kickoff rule. So, I mean, I take that for what it's worth. And I hope he hears it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes, but the Chiefs are owned by a MAGA family.
Right.
And if Donald Trump makes a phone call to them, whose job do you think is going to be at stake? And to your point, Michelle, Warner Brothers Discovery is about to be acquired by the Ellisons. You have Paramount already acquired by the Ellisons. Those are movie studios and television streaming services that create content, not political content. I'm not talking about CNN, but I'm talking about CBS for that matter. But I'm talking, or for that matter, CBS shows, TV shows that are aired on CBS. You talked about Cheers, but the show that I think really changed culture was Will and Grace.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Made it acceptable to be gay.
Yeah.
So in ways that had not been before.
And I would even argue that the Golden Girls even just kind of opened the door even for that, and the topics that they talked about and normalized. Yeah.
But what happens if you now want to have a show on CBS featuring a transgender
Right.
Person. I mean, what do the Ellisons say about that when they get a phone
Never
call?
happened now. Never happened.
Right? What happens at Warner Brothers if there's a movie about a transgender couple? Right? What happens when the Ellisons get a phone call about that? I mean, that's a danger that I think we've never seen before, because never in the history of at least modern culture have we had a president who has ever inserted himself into the day-to-day of culture, whether it's the kickoff rule at the NFL or TV shows or movies that may harness some element of culture that with which he does not agree.
There's a good news, bad news here. Bad news, bad news, less bad news.
Okay.
You're absolutely right that those things will not occur on CBS, nor on NBC anymore, nor on ABC, which how Disney bent the knee. That's the bad news. The less bad news is they don't matter nearly as much as they used to. The top shows, I went through these numbers, I don't have it handy, but the top shows universally are football games now, to your point, Michelle, about the NFL, and yours, Julie, about the ownership of it and control of it. And that's why Trump is trying to meddle in it.
Yeah.
But entertainment shows, I can't remember the number one show, and I can't remember, I don't watch these things anymore. I used to be a TV critic. I don't watch TV anymore in the old way. I think maybe reached 5% of the country. They don't have the influence that they have. They're small, right? And that's a more, to my mind, my way of thinking, that's a more natural way of thinking about culture than mass media and mass culture. That we all have this supposed shared experience. When Walter Cronkite said, and that's the way it is, if you were black or an immigrant, it wasn't the way it was. If you watched Cheers, even, if you were black, you didn't see yourself on that show. And so culture never represented the culture in that sense. So we see something new emerging now. And part of the problem here is it's the right wing that understands this better. So they create things like PragerU, which are insidious and slick and propagandistic and
Very
awful.
They're
well produced, right? They're really well produced, and they know what they're doing. And I was talking to a friend of mine, a former colleague of mine yesterday, who was organizing, and she's trying to figure out how not to have a liberal Talking Points USA, but how to understand the lessons from what Charlie Kirk did, not in an Ezra Klein way, for God's sakes, but just to say, what can we do on the left to organize and defend? And it's not going to be through old media. It's going to have to be through a whole bunch of smaller entities that come together.
But I'll tell you how good they are. Michelle, I don't want to tell your story because you're the one that sent this to me. But remember that video you sent to me about that woman who was doing...
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
Because I tell people the story all the time, and it's amazing.
So I feel like because I have been waiting in the swamp of right-wing media for the last 6 years, I should have known who this person was. I did not. She's part of, I think it's what the Daily Caller, I think it was Ben Shapiro's company. I can't remember. Or Daily Wire. She's part of that universe.
No, she was Turning Kirk.
What's that?
She was Turning Point USA, I believe.
But she's part of that network. You know what I mean? Like the media network. And she had like her own little show and everything. But I didn't know who she was. And I was on YouTube and I was searching for millennial gray because people were talking about millennial gray and how it's this gray color that millennials like. Apparently, I didn't know this about myself.
Is it your hoodie color now? Right? Is that millennial gray?
Kind of, but even like paler. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. I don't know taupe from mauve, so I'm just checking out here. I don't know.
And it's like how we all have these very builder grade apartments and homes that don't have any color. And her argument was that we have to express ourselves more in our interior design and be more selective about the things that we buy to decorate our homes and how it's like affects the brain development of our children and about how like we have to make things with our hands. And I'm watching this because I love doing all this stuff and I love decorating my house. And I'm like, oh yes, I totally agree with this. And she's like, then starts talking about communist countries and how communist countries have these very gray buildings with no, there's no individualistic expression in any of the architecture. And I'm like, yeah, that is right. Oh, right.
Oh, you're getting hypnotized. I can see it.
Right. And then she goes on to talk and she's like, just like Tucker Carlson said. And I'm like, And it goes to a quote by Tucker Carlson talking about how to be creative and making things with your hands, like, is good for your mental health and it's good for society. And again, like, I fundamentally agree with this. Like, I'm always making things with my hands. And I'm like, what am I watching? And I turn and it's this beautiful young girl, young woman, makeup, very well produced. You know, it didn't seem like it was propaganda. And
It snuck in on you.
It snuck in because I was looking for interior design videos about this millennial gray thing. And I immediately called Julie. I was like, I'm not going to say a word. I just want you to watch this.
And I'm watching this and I'm like, this all makes a lot of sense. I'm not even into decorating the way Michelle is, as you can see my white wall. But I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Okay. And all of a sudden it gets to the end, Michelle goes, guess who this was? This was either, I think it was a Charlie Kirk production.
Yeah.
Production. But that's where they're so good at this.
It's insidious.
There's nothing on the left to counter that. And I will go back to the fact that Foster Freeze gave Charlie Kirk $75,000 and said, go to town, see what you can create. And these two coal magnets gave Ben Shapiro $5.5 million, which was a rounding error for them, and said, hey, we know you're 19 years old, but go to town and see what you can do. And they have obviously created something amazing with this that is not just political, but it's cultural, because Breitbart was right. Culture, politics is downstream of culture, and they've all internalized that. Meanwhile, on this side of the aisle, we're still talking about, hey, do we give money to this campaign or this campaign? Like, they're not fighting individual elections. They're fighting to create a whole brave new world. I mean, it really is an Aldous Huxley kind of.
Oh yeah.
All of their years of reading Ayn Rand actually circulated, and now that they're doing it.
Right. I feel like that. Yeah, the Atlas Shrugged was like OG. Everybody was reading that. Yeah.
We're still sitting here trying to figure out whether we run campaigns like we used to run them in the 90s. And, how are we possibly ever going to win this culture war and this media war when they have what they have? And we're still sitting here complaining about CNN and the New York Times, which we're about to do in a moment.
Right. And avidly. And this is the way that agendas are set and manipulated and mangled. Right? We talked about this last time we were together. I quoted Hannah Arendt on people tying on to abstract notions. And the cats and the dogs in Springfield, Ohio, was not a real issue. But by bringing it up, they made it the fake issue. It's the distraction that got you around. And then we don't talk about real things. We don't talk about the things in people's real lives. We don't listen to them about their real lives. Instead, we're talking about that crap. And they do it brilliantly, devilishly, evilly. But they're successful at it. And media, once again, are complicit because they don't understand. That's where it is, and they don't call it what it is.
One of the other things too, and the podcast world, but from a wellness perspective, I feel like the wellness to MAGA pipeline has been one since COVID, especially. And this Alex Clark, that I just looked her up, the young woman that I was just talking about, her name is Alex Clark. She had a podcast, and her dream was to work in fashion journalism at Teen Vogue, which is just, I mean, how
full circle.
Full circle. But her thing is that she's been vocal on her stance on hormonal birth control. She became part of the MAHA movement. I mean, again, it's just another way for them to kind of get you. And I've watched my own family members fall prey to this because of like fitness podcasts or whatever that they listen to. And, I just want to bring it back to the TV stuff before we move on to New York Times, because I'm such a consumer of television growing up, especially, and looking at what's happening now. And, I had a professor in college, Bob Thompson at Newhouse at Syracuse, and he likes, the whole thing was about 80s and 90s television and culture. And it's one of my favorite classes ever. It feels so retro now, but looking forward, and yes, we're watching stuff on Netflix and Prime and Apple TV. But again, these things are owned and run by Jeff Bezos. And and Tim Cook and Bob Iger, and so I saw an article the other day about how the future of television programming and film, there was a theory that it will move forward and evolve on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was so interesting. Yeah. And I would just love to know, like, just from what you know and everything that you've seen, like, what do you see happening in that space? Because I'm so fascinated by it.
YouTube is the power of video culture now, full stop.
Yeah.
And it's not recognized by the rest of media because they don't, which surprises me because everybody who has kids of a certain age, mine are older than that now, but they're not watching, they don't have televisions in the sense that we did. They don't have cable, they're watching YouTube. And it's hard to get our heads around this because what we think mattered was things that had simultaneous scale. If you were the Super Bowl and you spoke to a third of America at once, that was power. That was what mattered. And anything that was smaller than that didn't really matter. And YouTube is a collection of millions of things that are rejected as not mattering, including that video you saw, including all kinds of things, good and bad.
Yeah.
And so we've got to get our head around this idea of culture and speech at a smaller scale. And we in journalism don't tend to listen to that speech. We think we're the only ones who speak. And people have resented that, and they're out now speaking, and they're feeling heard in a different way. And that's where the power is. YouTube is the future. Not just YouTube, it's also, I think, TikTok. I'm a big fan of TikTok.
Okay.
Because it's collaborative.
Yeah. What do you think about, I mean, I totally agree in that sense. What about the new ownership? Because there's new owners, right?
Ellisons. Once again, the Ellisons.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? They're going to be in control. So that was our alternative to, I mean, even though it was owned by the Chinese and even though YouTube was owned by Google, nonetheless, that was our alternative to mass media. And now it's not an alternative. And our only alternative then is open source. But those things are small. I'm on Mastodon because I want to support Mastodon, but Mastodon's tiny. It's the people there matter to me, so I care about it and post to it every day. But to try to argue that we could make mass movements out of Mastodon is not going to get a lot of attention right now.
Yeah, and to the point of what you said earlier about how Michelle, or I forgot who said this, maybe you did, Jeff, about how people think that we're going to somehow outlive Donald Trump. It's just, or executives think it's not a big deal. It's going to outlive Donald Trump. His people are taking over culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know what you're thinking about outliving. He could drop dead tomorrow. The Ellisons will still own all of these media enterprises and soon TikTok. So good luck.
Yeah, and it's culture as it was. And as before I yan-yanned and said, well, it's smaller than it ever was. But they're not buying it as a business. They're buying it as a propaganda arm.
Yep. Exactly.
And that's what matters.
Yep.
Yeah. It's so scary. Whoa.
Yeah. It's funny because we sit around trashing everybody for bending the knee to Trump. The Washington Post, I don't even understand.
Yeah.
I
try not to think about it.
Try not to think about it because you had a competitor, it's the New York Times, that now has just become a complete and utter
Exactly.
I mean, they mustered a little outrage over the Khashoggi, over the MBS dinner because one of their own journalists had been murdered by MBS, Jamal Khashoggi. But had that not happened, I'm sure they would not have had an issue with it. The Wall Street Journal, of course, is the Wall Street Journal, owned by the Murdochs. They could pretend they're independent all they want. They're not. And of course, we've talked a great deal about what's happening with cable, but and even not cable like CBS and ABC. But the one constant, I guess, has been the New York Times, which is owned by the same family that's owned the New York Times for the last, 100-something years. And, we assume are not bending the knee or doing anything else, but you have made the argument, and I think it's a very persuasive one, that they're self-censoring themselves. That they are effectively, I think, if I'm interpreting what you're saying, they're broken to the point of just bending without anybody holding a gun to their head to bend the knee, right? Is that what you're?
Yeah, well, it's not just bending the knee to Trump. It's puzzled me and troubled me to try to figure out why the New York Times won't be blunt about what's happening in the country and soft pedals, puts cotton around everything, and tries to make it look better. And we can talk about a few examples in a minute. But my theory is that, so A.G. Sulzberger, the sixth generation family member who's now in charge of the place, loves to talk about independence and how the New York Times is independent. So I asked myself, independent from whom? Politicians, okay. Advertisers, okay. But now that, and my friend Jay Rosen at New York University in 2017 wrote a piece noting that when the primary financial support of the New York Times shifted from advertisers to the audience, that would change something in the newsroom. And he kind of didn't say, I don't know what it will, but it's going to change the relationship with the newsroom. And my theory on top of that is that the New York Times now regularly wants to piss off its liberal readers as a way to say, see, you don't own us.
Yep.
We're independent of you. We're independent of the public we serve.
Wow.
And they constantly do this where they piss us off. And they know they're doing it. They're not dumb. But they know they're doing it, and it lifts under this, back to James Carey, this veil of professionalism, of objectivity, of separation from the public. Rather than being part of the public conversation, they think that they are above the public conversation. That's true of the New York Times, and I think of journalism in general. And that's the danger that we're in now, in that we don't have someplace where we feel heard and we feel we can speak. Except we do. We have the internet, but that's dismissed because that's small. And when they got rid of the public editor of the New York Times, they said, well, but we have Twitter. And now they insult Twitter and everyone on Twitter and go past Twitter to Blue Sky and Facebook and wherever.
Yeah, Twitter's not real life. Don't pay attention to it. It doesn't matter.
Exactly what they say. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
As if the New York Times audience is representative of anything. And it's not.
I always, yeah, I mean, I live in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, right? I am your typical New York Times, New Yorker reader.
Yeah, with your little canvas tote bag.
Yeah, and NPR listener and PBS watcher. But the reality is, like, there are not that many of us out there, and I'm not so sure who. I'm not so sure what they're doing with this constant, like, both sides of everything. I think you have a few examples, Jeff, of what we're talking about here.
So I regularly use the hashtags Broken Times and Broken Post. And I'm gratified to see that Broken Times is starting to catch on with other people using it as a way to mark the receipts of when the Times acts weird. So, for example, today they had a headline asking whether, with Mandami, who just took a picture of a selfie of himself in tourist class, flying to Washington, meeting with Trump, asking whether they will play nice. Well, it's not a question of whether Mamdani will play nice. It's the question, obviously, is whether Trump will play nice. But they don't put it that way, right? No. They stand back a little bit and they try. That's an insidious case, to use that word again, of both sidesing. They also have this way of trying to abstract awful things to a harmless level. So they had a headline about how Epstein letters reveal a lost New York.
Oh my gosh, I saw that too. Oh
right. And it was a way to say, look at all the people who used to have power in the city who don't now, who were there and part of that. But there's a very different way that you could have presented that.
The actual substance of that story, by the way, was well taken. But the way they framed
the presentation.
The presentation was wrong. And I think headline writers, or whether it's done on purpose or what's going on.
I'm sure it was on purpose.
Yeah. And that's where executives, editorial executives, do have their say, is play and how big it's played, where it's played. The Trump threat to execute members of Congress who reminded members of the service that they should not follow illegal offers. I don't get the print Times anymore, but Mark Jacobs, a journalist, pointed out that appeared on page 16 of the print Times.
Let me just.
I'm going to hang members of Congress for treason.
Let me just stop you here for a second. The fact that this story will be off well, it's not even on the front page of the New York Times, but the fact that the story will be not discussed again tomorrow, Saturday, November 22nd, is, if you need any more indication of how this country is gliding into autocracy on a glide path towards autocracy, I don't know what more you need to hear.
Amen.
I mean, yeah.
Amen.
Like, am I being over the top here and thinking that like a screenshot of, you know, the punishable by death one, because he wrote a bunch of crazy stuff, but there was one in particular calling for the deaths, right? That should have been huge, taking up most of the front page above the fold. Like, it just seems like that should have happened and could have made such a splash and a serious impact in the conversation, and it just, you know, just not happening.
I read an essay that was a translation of a German book into French and then into English, and I came across this word that I wanted to see whether it was in the original, and it kind of wasn't. And I won't bore you with that nerdery, but still, I like the word a lot. It talked about the banalization, the making banal of things.
Yeah.
And the New York Times turns the evil into the banal. Doesn't justify it, but does that. I mean, when MBS met with Trump, their headline was, "Blending Family and Governance, Trump organizations talk real estate deal with Saudis." It's a corruption beyond anything we have seen, but they put that cotton around it. My last example from the Hall of Shame, and I'm really curious whether you read this, Julie, is David Brooks's column today, which I found just appalling, where he is defending people who will end up in the Epstein letters and lists because critics have generalized so much against an elite, and so he's standing up for them as an elite, not unlike the headline of Old New York. And he ignored utterly the victims of the abuse.
Well,
Go ahead, I'm eager to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it was even more awful than that, because he's basically saying, because QAnon had this conspiracy theory about Epstein, that therefore there's nothing to see here. This is all a Candace Owens thing, and therefore, because it emanated originally from QAnon, the rest of us have somehow been infected by it. And then he goes,
can dismiss it all then as conspiracy theorizing. Yeah.
Listen, he lives in Washington, so he's not far from the Capitol, where dozens of women stood up, looked straight into the camera, without fear, or maybe with some fear and trepidation, but they did it anyway, and called out the most powerful people in the world, because they know who they were trafficked to, even if the rest of us don't, and said that they were sexually abused as girls by very powerful people, some of whom we do not know, whose names we do not know, and some of whom, apparently, according to one of them, some of these people have never been mentioned, or hypothesized about.
And our names we would know.
And our names that we would know, right? So that's not QAnon. And to imply that they're like paid crisis actors is putting you in the same category as somebody else who said that another tragedy was paid actors. And that's Alex Jones, who was sued for every penny that he'll ever make and more, for implying that the little kids who were killed up in Connecticut a few years ago, more than a few years ago now, a decade ago, that their families were paid crisis actors and it never happened. That's basically what David Brooks is implying in this column.
Let me ask you both your predictions. I don't like predictions normally, but your predictions of what's going to happen with the Epstein files story in two ways. And the obvious first part is how much we'll actually get. I think it's debatable. But whatever we get, how will the New York Times and how will our major media cover this, do you think?
I think we will not get a lot. I think we'll get a few scalps, and they'll probably be scalps that Donald Trump would have loved to give away anyway. And then he'll say, or Pam Bondi will say, we're doing an investigation, so we can't give you more. There's an ongoing investigation. Or Trump will classify the rest as a national security. matter, which he has every right to do under this law, and also constitutionally, he can unilaterally classify anything as a national security matter, and there's no statute that can overrule him. And then the media will say, okay, thanks, and we'll move on. So what's heartbreaking to me, and I know this from my days at Fox, and here I have to be careful because I have an NDA, but the Murdochs wanted Roger Ailes a scalp, and so they got it. But hypothetically, there may have been other people involved. And hypothetically, there may have been other people who assisted him in what he was doing. And the media kind of dropped it.
And I mean, I'm in total agreement with Julia about what I think we'll receive in an official capacity. My hope, and this is just fiction writing at this point, but some courageous patriot inside the FBI or somewhere else will leak this information, and will leak it to a publication like the Miami Herald or like a smaller newspaper, like a Daniel Ellsberg or an Alex Butterfield or somebody like that who has access to this information and is willing to fall on a sword essentially to make sure that the public knows about it. I mean, that's my only hope in the end, is that,
I hope so too. I hope so too. But in this day and age, when this Justice Department will prosecute anybody, within an inch of their life, you would need to be a really brave patriot to do that.
Yes,
and because there's going to be a very limited number of people who would know what is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for instance, Maureen Comey knows, right? And it's interesting. They had no plans to, and this drives me crazy. Apparently, they had no plans to prosecute anybody else for what they know was in the Epstein files, because the theory goes that the witnesses, the girls who now are women, were problematic witnesses because they, because of their histories. Well, if you were molested and raped as a young girl, believe me, you're going to probably have a problematic history.
Yeah. It informs the rest of your life.
And so, listen, nobody's the Virgin Mary under the best of circumstances. Never mind if you were molested by your father, your uncle, your next door neighbor, and then trafficked to Epstein.
The Prince of England. I mean, my God.
Remember the royal family, because of course, Ghislaine Maxwell was smart. She knew exactly who the vulnerable girls were, the ones who already were prone to have been molested or raped as even younger girls. As I think Virginia Giuffre started off being raped by or molested by a member of her family from an insanely young age, like, under 10. So of course you're not going to get great witnesses. And so you're punishing these girls again, who are now women, and protecting their predators, because the predators, of course, were apparently the pillars of society. Whereas these girls, now women, might have had a troubling background. Maybe they had drug addictions as a result of all this. Maybe they were sleeping around as a result of all this. You know what? You try being molested as a young kid and seeing if you're going to grow up to be, the president of Harvard University like Larry Summers.
Yeah.
Or as we discussed last week, the victim of, I guess I should say alleged victim of Matt Gaetz.
Of course.
Who was so desperate to get braces.
Braces.
Right? A homeless teenager who needed braces who ended up in this world. So how do you possibly blame her for what followed?
And they didn't prosecute Matt Gaetz, presumably because he thought she was 18, but also presumably because she was basically a prostitute. Well, she was a child prostitute. Like, you don't start walking the streets or going to parties to try to sleep with somebody to get braces if you have a stable home life where your parents get your braces for you, because in this case, they could not afford to do it. They were living in a homeless shelter. And she really wanted braces. I mean, like,
the whole story was honestly one of the more upsetting things.
Oh, it's disgusting.
But this is what I mean, right? Like, what are we expecting here? What are we expecting? There's a
that, by the way, let's say that was reporting from the New York Times. So it was Michael Schmidt. Good for it. But to your point, Michelle, that just like that Trump tweet, call it whatever we will, about hanging people should have been huge on the front page. So could the Times have played that story even bigger and longer, I think.
Yeah. And I think we lost Julie here for a second, but I wanted to throw this up again. This the New York Times puff piece on Olivia Newton. Because though, I mean, and if you go to the website, it's a whole interactive thing with like this, cinematic black and white video of her and photographs. It's all very editorialized, obviously. But the irony here, and I don't mean this as a personal dig at him by any means, but it was written by Jacob Bernstein, who was Carl Bernstein's son. And also the son of Nora Ephron, and he made that beautiful documentary. Everything is copy. It is just so he's a great writer, and
he's done good work. But why would you lower yourself to this?
Yeah, I mean, why do you think he did it?
It's a great question, which is how professors find time to figure out an answer, and I'm not sure. I think it's that draw of the narrative and the story becomes so seductive that it takes away from what our role is and should be. And it's not, and a third time I'll quote James Carey, it's not in this view that we are here to inform society. That itself is as hubristic as thinking that we are the storytellers. Society is in conversation. That is the discourse of democracy. We should play a secondary role to that, to help that discourse. Yes, to help inform it, but also to help curate it and bring it together, to convene it. But that's even too powerful. Also to make people feel heard, also to see who's not being heard. That's the larger role of the deprofessionalized, post-professional journalism. And just like you said earlier about culture, and how we talked about culture being taken over by the people themselves who make it themselves as creatively as they wish, I think that's the future of journalism. I think it's a deprofessionalized journalism, which is going to scare people. Oh no, nobody's going to make any money. I don't mean professional in that sense, but I mean it in the sense that we had this secret code that we stood above and beyond the people. And we thus didn't listen to people. We lost the skill of listening. When my colleague Carrie Brown and I started engagement journalism, which she now works on at Montclair State, it's all about teaching journalists to listen because we don't listen well. and I think that comes from respecting the lived experiences of many, many, many people and how they live and what they do. Instead, what comes along is Olivia Newsy gets her continued moment to be heard. With, by the way, glam shots in the convertible, as if she is a Taylor Swift song come to life, as he put it.
It's how they covered Curtis Yarvin. I think what was it earlier this year, last year, the whole Curtis Yarvin profile. Made him look cool, and he's not. He's a weirdo and terribly dangerous. And
Peter Thiel. And all those new op-ed videos that they do of interviews with people, let's bring together the worst people. Mm-hmm. That's who they're hearing. That's who they're listening to. That's who they're giving the microphone and the stage to. What judgment does that show?
Yeah.
Well, on that note,
now that we're all pissed, it's ready for a weekend. Damn it.
Go have a great weekend, everybody. We kept you for an hour. More than an hour.
And like I said this morning, Julie, everyone should go cleanse themselves with Ken Burns' docuseries on the American Revolution. It's so well done. Everyone clear out your cobwebs, at least for me, and all the bad Olivia Newsy profiles, and watch that instead. It's pretty good.
Well, or do what we're all doing and reloading Telios or whatever Ryan Lisa's chapter 2 of what else.
Pluribus episode 4 is out.
Yeah.
Have you both watched it?
No, is it good?
It actually is in a freaky way. Yeah. And I'm not anymore. I don't tend to stream madness, but yeah, watch it.
I wish I could. I'm married to somebody who spends all of his time during the day practicing as a lawyer, and therefore comes home and immediately has to watch toggle between CNN and MSNBC all night long, and I'm like,
enough.
I know, enough. And he's like, no, what do you mean? I have to catch up on the news. I'm like, oh my God, why can't you do what the rest of us do and do it during the day? But she takes his job seriously and therefore doesn't do what the rest of us do, which is reload Brian Lisa's
I wonder how many page views. I hope he reveals that. How many page views is he getting just from reloading?
I know.
I gotta give him credit.
Oh yeah. I mean, the bamboo aside.
What a dish! The bamboo side. What a dish best served cold.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. And for those of you who haven't read it, we're not going to give you the spoiler. Read it to the end.
Yes, except I will tell you that the person mentioned at the end, I was on Abby Phillips' show with a few months ago, and he was incredibly nice and very sweet, and I'm kind of very, and I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, wow, this guy doesn't seem like the kind of guy somebody would who would have done. Not this part, but what he actually was known for. I was like, he's so nice and kind of like guy, grandpa next door kind of guy.
It's just like Michelle's video. It's the power of seduction.
It's the power of, I guess so. I guess I missed that power of seduction. Maybe I missed what other people are seeing. In any case, I wish him well. I wish Olivia Newsy well. I wish Ryan Leeser well. I wish RFK Jr.'s brainworm well, so my take.
I draw the line at the brainworm. I don't wish that.
I know. I wish the brainworm well, not him. I wish the brainworm well. It's a lot of heroin.
Keep eating more. Yeah,
keep eating more of that brain because there's a lot of heroin that's powering that that worm. Will you please come back?
I hope so. I so much enjoy our conversations. Please, I'd be honored anytime.
We'd be happy to have you next Friday at 11 if you're welcome, but I don't want to put you on the spot. So you let us know if you're available. Yeah. We will always be happy to host you.
It's a real pleasure, and I mean it in honor. I admire both of you and your work, and it's so great to be in a place to talk sanity. And yes, I'm free next Friday. Is it next Friday? Is Black Friday already?
Yeah, it is. Isn't that crazy?
I'm around. I won't be going to the store.
Me neither. I'm not participating.
I'm actually not free next Friday. I have to take my French cousin to Philadelphia. But maybe the Friday after that, maybe the 5th.
Friday after that, I'm in Austria.
Oh, well, you can
for the European Media Summit.
Very nice. All right, well, we'll figure out a time.
We will. I hope we do. I really want to. I'd love to continue this. This is healthy for me.
We love it.
Better than watching a Ken Burns documentary, frankly.
But not as good as Ryan Lee's Substack.
Nothing.
We're probably driven about, I don't know how many people will be watching this eventually. Ryan Lee's, you're welcome. So,
except for the bamboo. The bamboo was a bit much.
The bamboo was much, but I got it was a nice metaphor, but then it just kept going on and on.
Yeah.
Much like Olivia Newsy's metaphors keep going on. They actually were very perfect for each other. And then, by the way, Keith Olbermann we never got to Keith Olbermann jumping in to that whole situation. It was like, ooh, and Keith Olbermann's like, look at all this tea that Ryan Lee's is spilling, and everybody's like, he's spilling it about you, buddy. Like, what?
The drama.
These are the people we hang out with in media. What are we doing wrong?
It's great. And I mean, you know what? Never for the grace. I mean, I don't have anything like that in my life, but never for the grace of God. I guess everybody's reading this being like, wow, thank God I never had a pissed off boyfriend. That pissed off enough, I guess. I also never did anything like that. So I guess that would merit not being pissed off at me. But anyway, okay. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. And yes, we'll try to do this next week. If I'm not in Philly for sure on Friday. If I am in Philly, then it's some other date.
We'll find a time. We'll find a time.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. All right. See you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.